April 2007, behind the scenes here at Countdown, we jumped all over a story making the rounds that President Bush had almost blown himself up when he plugged an electrical cord into a hydrogen-electric hybrid car. We put it in a rundown and went about producing the segment, but when we watched the actual videotape closely, we saw it was not Mr. Bush's fault at all. We did the segment anyway. We exonerated the president because when a story changes course on you, you have to go with it rather than continue to force it to go your way, no matter how you might feel about the subject. Which brings us to our third story tonight, the conservative group Judicial Watch and its big expose on Nancy Pelosi, in which the only thing exposed was the speaker's guiltlessness. They have obtained emails from Pelosi staff and Pentagon staff concerning Pelosi's use of military aircraft. Judicial Watch concluding, quote, "These documents show that Speaker Pelosi treats the Air Force like her personal airline, with unreasonable requests for military travel, unconcerned about wasting taxpayer money with last-minute cancellations." Except the actual documents show no such thing. ABC News reporting that Pelosi uses military transport less than once a month, wherein Republican predecessor Denny Hastert was an almost weekly frequent flyer. Last-minute cancellations? Yes, when she first became Speaker, before the Air Force told her she had priority, so she could stop reserving flights she might not need. Unreasonable requests? Well, maybe, except that most of those requests were for other members of Congress because her office coordinates their military travel too. Not a single Pelosi trip was for political purposes. And a Pentagon spokesman yesterday said no one there found Pelosi's aircraft use excessive. In fact, no less than Bush Press Secretary Tony Snow, the late Tony Snow, when the right first pushed this non-scandal, defended Pelosi's plane use. No surprise, considering it was first ordered by his boss, perhaps the most infamous gratuitous user of military aircraft for political purposes ever. Let's turn now to MSNBC political analyst Lawrence O'Donnell, also, of course, a contributor at HuffingtonPost.com. Lawrence, thanks for your time tonight, sir.
Good to be here, Keith.
I started this segment talking about how sometimes a story doesn't germinate the way you expect it to, or maybe even the way you might want it to. Does that sound like what happened here? The far right got all worked up about Pelosi getting military flights. Judicial Watch filed these FIA, Freedom of Information requests, and then ignored the fact that the results completely refuted the narrative they were trying to sell?
Well, you know, Keith, when you go through all of that work of doing a Freedom of Information Act request, you build up a little momentum in a certain direction, and they just couldn't turn themselves around when they got these emails that showed absolutely nothing. But Judicial Watch really jumped the shark with this story. Judicial Watch has become a parody of itself with this story. But to give them one credit, they do on their website allow you to link to the evidence that they use. And when you link to that evidence, as I did today, and sat there delighting in these emails between the Speaker's office and the military on these planes, you keep trying to find anything that they could possibly base the story on, and there's absolutely nothing there. You know, President Bush, I think wisely, after 9/11, when they saw on that day that the vice president had to be rushed out of his office in the White House because they believed the White House was under attack. Once we started living in a world where the White House could be under attack in something other than a bad movie, it became wise to think about succession. If you were to somehow lose the president and the vice president, the Speaker of the House becomes president. With that in mind, President Bush said the Speaker should have military aircraft for travel the same way we do, the same way the first two do. President, vice president, the third one there in line should have it too. And that's where this comes from. It's an invention of President Bush's, and probably a wise one.
The invention of this story, though, and the attempt to make Nancy Pelosi look bad for some reason, which seems most operative in that? Is that bass-ackwards narrative that the Republicans are the grown-ups when it comes to the military and everybody else are just kids out there? Or is this simple, good old-fashioned sexism?
It seems like there's a sexism thing here where they're trying to create the image of diva, you know, that she's demanding this extraordinary kind of limo or something, you know, in an unnecessary way, in an unnecessary situation. And, of course, this wasn't her idea to use military transport this way, but it is a good idea. And she uses it wisely when you examine these records. There's just nothing there. And what is in the records, as you've said, is plenty of notations of senators, Republican senators, Democratic senators, and congressmen requesting these planes. Some of them, by the way, canceling. Some of them at the last minute deciding they're going to cancel the use of those things. And there is some sort of extra expense involved in that, understandably, for the military. But Judicial Watch tries to lay tries to find something wrong in all of this and lay it entirely at Nancy Pelosi's feet when you can't find anything wrong in these documents that anyone is doing in the Congress with these planes. I mean, you can imagine that someone's abusing the privilege somewhere, but Judicial Watch didn't find it.
When you hear constant refrains about earmarks, about government waste, etc., they're all good government stuff that Republicans not only failed to reform or address or hold themselves to when they were in power, but which they abused far more willfully and far more obviously than Democrats have. Do you think the Republican Party really thinks that voters don't remember what they did when they had the unfettered power to, express their own values?
Yeah, I think they are relying on this very short attention span of both the media and the public. They're betting on that. And they're also betting on the best way to play this game is to try to keep the public's eye on the pebbles of government instead of the giant mountains of government, like the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, Medicare, Social Security, to see people screaming about earmarks when Social Security and Medicare are the giant expenditures in the budget is just to reveal that those people are not serious about government.
MSNBC political analyst Lawrence O'Donnell, also, as we mentioned, a contributor to the Huffington Post. As always, sir, great thanks.
Thanks, Keith.